Okay, friends, so out there and over Zoom, welcome back for this afternoon's meditation session, Dhamma talk and meditation. I'd like to continue again in talking about different aspects, some more aspects about living and dying with awareness. And again, as I mentioned before, it's most important to understand what living with awareness means before one can actually die with awareness. So that's more complicated, actually. Understanding and cultivating the living with awareness. We already talked this morning about the process of impermanence in the mind, and the senses are always changing. I want to talk a little bit more about that because it's probably one of the most important aspects about our life, and especially in living a life of more fulfillment, or living a life with awareness and decreasing the amount of problems and sufferings that we accumulate. So the Buddha was giving a talk to the monks. And he said, "Monks, I'll teach you the all." You go, "Really? Wow. Let's hear it." He said, "What is the all? The eye and seeing, the ear and hearing, the nose and smelling, the tongue and tasting, the body and feeling, and the mind and mind objects, or knowing." And he said, "If you can find me any other all, come on." All the monks were, I don't know. I don't think there is anything else. So basically what the Buddha is implying is that our life, what we call our life, is made up of just moments of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and the mind interpreting those things, and then deciding to take action on those things. And that process just is repeating itself hundreds and thousands of times, actually per second, actually, in the ultimate and deepest breakdown. So basically, that means what our life is just moments of the world impinging on our senses and the mind reacting to them. And that's when the baby first comes out of the womb. Well, even in the womb, it's also feeling things, right? Because doctors tell us that babies can hear sounds even in the womb, and things like that. So, but especially when it comes out, and then all of its senses are starting to be impinged. Of course, as I've already mentioned, the baby in the beginning his mind is her mind is very expansive, and it's not really reacting or clinging to things so much. Things are just coming by, but the mind still hasn't formed those kind of identifications and attachments. So that process of what is called the moment-to-moment awareness, that is basically what is going on our whole life. I wanted to talk also and mention, and we've already talked about it before many times in other talks, but what that life process consists of is of the five aggregates. There's an important topic in the Buddhist psychology about the five aggregates. And basically, they make up everything, our whole existence, actually. They make up all the elements of our body and the mind. And it's these five groups. An aggregate means like a collection or a group of things. And they're always changing. And so the first of these groups is the material form. And basically that means all the cells of our body that I mentioned this morning, that this body is just comprised of billions of cells. Cells are comprised of molecules and atoms. And then atoms are made up of electrons. And it's these that make up all material matter. So in this body, as well as the external world, everything in science and physics, has been telling us that even material matter is just basically condensed energy, right? Quantum physics. But it appears, to be solid. But and so the material vibrations are all the things that we feel and also hear and see. Material vibrations, sound vibrations, odor vibrations, taste vibrations. These are all comprised of, basically it's electromagnetic energy. Because the electrons moving around an atom create, electromagnetic energy, and billions of those are tightly compressed together and interacting. Basically, that's what we, experience. And, most physicists or other, scientists would, have been telling us that, but it's like, to them, it's unimportant. To them, we're just born, go around, do this, live a life. But they don't explain, the real nitty gritty of what is going on under the surface. But the Buddha thought it was important. And that's why he made that one of the most important aspects of his teaching, because it's how we've gotten fooled and trapped into our habits and so on. So anyway, the group of material forms. So like when you see this form, because you've seen it before, that memory of that particular form is remembered in your mind. So that belongs to your, also, when you see that again, it's that material form vibration and that perception that's being recreated in your consciousness. Now, again, I know this sounds a little bit deep, but it is deep, but it's important for understanding illusion. So anyway, these material vibrations, basically, they're the physical vibrations. The Buddha didn't deny that the physical world exists, but it doesn't exist in exactly the way that we happen to perceive it. And then there's the feeling. So these vibrations coming through our senses, they're just vibrations. And that's one of the reasons why I suggested, during your meditation to try to cultivate this idea that what you're experiencing are just vibrations. But then these different vibrations, some of them are experienced as pleasant vibrations and others are experienced as painful vibrations or neutral vibrations. And this is all also depends on the way that you've experienced them in the past. And so we attribute particular objects to having a pleasant and a painful nature. I'll get back to that in a moment. So the pleasant and painful and neutral quality of the vibration is called the feeling tone. So whenever you experience something, like, the mind relates to it as this is something pleasurable, and it's sort of like an attraction, that kind of, you want to have a little bit more of that. That's because of the pleasant quality. Or the other is the painful one, it's the pulling away. So there's attraction to the pleasant sensation and a pulling away, aversion to the unpleasant sensation. And then you perceive that material vibration creates a perception in the mind. And this is actually one of the most important parts to understand about the mind and about illusion. Is that now, a baby, when he first sees things, he's not recognizing anything. There's no names or labels or really that are being fixed in his mind. But with language and so on, you start to learn, somebody goes, "That's a bell." "Oh, bell." Now, next time you hear that, "Oh, that's a bell." Now you're not hearing the sound, you're hearing a bell. So in the beginning, you're just hearing vibration. It's just hearing. It's just sound, or it's just smell, or it's just taste, or it's just body feeling, or it's just a thought. But because of the perception, we've turned these vibrations into objects that appear to stand out in time and space. And then these objects have their pleasant quality or painful quality, depending on your past conditioning. And that painful or pleasant quality is then superimposed on the object. And as I mentioned before, basically the drive of all living life is to, find happiness. And to find happiness and to avoid pain. And so we're attracted to the objects that bring us a pleasurable feeling. We're attracted to them. The ones that bring a painful feeling, we have aversion to them. But again, these have been created through conditioning, because not everybody experiences the same thing. What may give me a pleasurable feeling may give somebody else an unpleasant feeling or a neutral feeling. And what causes me an unpleasant feeling may produce a pleasant feeling in you or a neutral feeling. Any of you have that experience? People arguing over, well, I like this kind of music. I don't like that kind. I like this kind of food, that kind of sound, that kind of smell. If good and bad or pleasant or unpleasant was inherently a quality of the object, everyone would experience it in the same way. But because people don't, and people even fight to the death arguing over what kind of music they want to play, or so many other things. Even families argue about what restaurant they want to go to, because they have different likes and dislikes. But these have been created in the mind. And nothing has any inherent or intrinsic ugliness or beauty about it, or pleasant or unpleasant about it, but these have been created. So this is important to understand, because we we then associate the objects of our experience with, we've divided up the world into these things I like, these other things I don't like. And then people struggle with that. And they get in fights and they get in arguments and people are murdered and things are stolen because of this clinging to this idea that these things are going to bring, some benefit or pleasure, and other things are going to be no benefit or painful. But again, these scenarios have been created in the mind. And it's through these sort of aggregates. So far, we've talked about the material aggregate, which is basically the way atoms and molecules vibrate. So some of them vibrate in a way that they're like fluid, like water running down, creates water. Or others are more solid. Others have heat. Others have motion. So that's why the Buddha termed them the four elements of earth, fire, water, and air. But basically, it's just the way that electromagnetic energy exhibits its qualities. And this is also part of the investigative thinking. So we have the material vibration, then the feelings that the material vibrations recreate, and then the perception, the objects that I mentioned, especially when you're hearing sounds, your eyes are closed and you're meditating. I asked you this morning how many people saw little mental pictures kind of pop out of the mind every time they heard something. Well, that's a door slamming, or that's a teacher talking, or that's somebody moving, right? You all see a lot of them? I mean, almost every time. So then those are the perceptions. And the mind just automatically recreates them each time. And then we react to them. So the fourth of those aggregates is the sankhara, which means the reactions. Although sankhara means some other things too, but in this context, basically it's the reactions that are generated based on those sensations, feelings, and perceptions. And the reaction will be, if it's a pleasant feeling and the object is considered a pleasant object, the reaction would then be one to try to hold on to it, or keep holding on to it in some way. Or if it's considered to be an unpleasant object, then the reaction would be try to, get away from it, like scratching an itch. So every time you scratch something or touch your body, it's because there's an unpleasant sensation there. And unconsciously, you want to get rid of it. You don't have to think that out. These are very deeply ingrained nervous system habits that are recreated each time we have the experience, or just a way of reacting. Somebody looks at you funny and you have a reaction or something. Just so many. And those reactions basically are the karma, create the karma. But those reactions are kind of stored and waiting there in the unconscious mind to pop out when a particular sense object comes into reach. And then we react to it, and that strengthens that karmic habit. So every time we react to something, either with wanting or aversion, and intentionally decide to do something, then that's called a karmic action, and that strengthens that sankhara. So now we have those four aggregates: material vibration, the feeling, the perception, the reaction, and then the fourth one is the consciousness. And the consciousness, we've already talked a bit about it. Basically, it's that awareness, that intrinsic awareness, which is, really the life force. But it's morphed into consciousness or dualistic consciousness. So this is where I make a distinction, or like to make a distinction, between consciousness and awareness. Now, the baby was born more or less with awareness because it wasn't thinking and reacting to things much at that time. It was a young baby. But then gradually it morphs into ego consciousness, as I had already explained. And basically that continues to gain strength and snowball through a whole person's life because they just don't know any better, or have never been taught about how this process works. So anyway, the ego consciousness basically is the observer, the feeling, material vibration, the feeling, the perception, and the reactions. These are sort of happening within the consciousness, or sort of the objects of the consciousness. Because you can observe a material vibration, right? You can watch a little itch, or the breath going in and out. And then you can watch a feeling, a pleasant feeling arising, unpleasant feeling. You can see the little perceptions that arise. Oh, that's my breath. That's an in-breath. That's an out-breath. All those words are perceptions. And it's the awareness that's sort of observing them. But specifically, it has been morphed into ego consciousness and creates this duality of I am looking at these objects that appear to be separate from myself. Or everything under the skin is me, everything from the skin outside is the other. So anyway, that consciousness also arises with each moment of perception, the dualistic consciousness. That means when there's a sensory contact, all five of those aggregates arise more or less simultaneously, along with the mind cognizing it. But then it vanishes very quickly if we're not trying to hold on to it. And so this process is called a mind moment. When the sense organ is impinged on, these form, feeling, perception, and reactions in the consciousness arise, and they quickly vanish, or there's something else that's following right on its heels, one after another. So that process of the arising and vanishing of each moment of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking arises and vanishes. These things are coming up out of the unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind is running, and if you can kind of visualize this, let's say there's a subterranean river running here. And whenever the senses are impinged, these aggregates kind of, come up from there and vanish, come up again and vanish, including the sense of ego consciousness. Comes up and vanishes like that. and it's similar to a graph, a EKG or these graphs where they can tell what's brain waves and like this, right? Thing comes up, peak, and goes down, and right? You're familiar with all that. Well, that's similar. That's the way our conscious mind is. The peak of those peaks. But that is happening so fast that we don't see it going back down. They're happening so fast that it remains, above the baseline. So the unconscious is below the baseline, the conscious is above the baseline. But we never see below the baseline, mostly because we just never have trained ourselves to. Of course, in dreams, you are aware, but we're basically asleep, so can't do much about that. And that process is said to be happening 10 to the 24th power. Now, if anybody can crunch some numbers, somebody did this for me, I think, a week or two ago, and he said it's something like a septillion times in a second that process is occurring. So it's understandable that we don't see the illusion that's created. Now, I'm just mentioning this just to kind of, not that we were really going to see it at that kind of a speed, but just to have an idea, even intellectually, how this conscious mind is working, and especially how we become sort of trapped in the habits and delusions. And so that's where the living with awareness comes in. Awareness of, especially of how the mind creates its karma through the sankharas and the reactions. So every time you react to something, that strengthens that habit. They go back down into the unconscious. And when a similar type of situation or sensation comes, that strengthened sankhara comes back up again, sort of automatically. And then it's re-strengthened again when we react to it. And it goes back down again to be prepped for the next time a similar thing comes up. Like that. And that process just has in most people, a closed loop circuit because they don't know how to break that circuit. And that's the key where the practice of meditation plays its important part. And especially the insight meditation and the practice of awareness, the vipassana meditation, and the 4 foundations of mindfulness, is designed at learning how to tune into that process. And by being aware of the material vibrations, the feelings, and the perceptions, when it comes that point of the intention or the reaction, that's where the practice of transformation really occurs. So when you have a sensory impingement, like when you first feel a kind of an itch or a pain arising in the body, but usually you can see that aversion, and then you can see the urge to want to get rid of that unpleasant sensation. But that urge arises very quickly. That urge is that prime sankhara, that habit that's waiting right there in the unconscious. And when something it doesn't like impinges on the senses, the intention to want to get rid of it or react to it comes up. But it happens so fast that usually we don't even see it, and we reacted before we really understood what had happened. Anybody ever have that kind of something like that happen to them? And people say, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And that's because simply we were not aware of the intention. So the intention is probably the key for transformation. In Pali, the word is called Chaitana Intention. That means the will. And this is where karma is created. So when you see that urge arise, let's say, even if you hear a sound, you can see the urge to want to open your eyes. Who did that? Who did that? You know, what is that? What is that? You know, people are looking this way and looking that way. So all of these, the body can't do anything without intention. So it's like that spark that causes the body to move or the mind to think. And it's there that we try to have our mindfulness. And that's why in this practice of body-based centered awareness, that's why it's the doorway for being able to see that mental process, because all this is happening through the nervous system. But normally we're not aware of the body. You know, our mind is out there. So when things happen, this process of the five aggregates is sort of coming up from the unconscious. But because we're not grounded, we don't see it until we've already reacted or got carried away by a particular stimulation. So that's why when you're more grounded in the body and you're feeling the subtle sensations. So how many people today could feel some, what I call subtle sensation? What do you think was a subtle sensation? You know, there's so many of them. But even with the breath, you know, there's many little sensations connected with just one in-breath. And then other type of little sensations, very subtle. See, normally you don't see those. So those are, now your mind has been brought down to their level. So our surface mind is up there riding that peak of the graph, because that's its habit. We've never been trained because we're focusing on these peaks of the graph. But when you start letting go of those peaks of the graph and you learn how to focus and ground your attention in the body, now the awareness is coming down to the red line level. And you're kind of seeing both. You're seeing what's underneath the red line and what's above the red line, or the baseline, let's say. And so when you can feel those subtle little vibrations, even the pulsations and so many other little sensations, and you can notice a kind of a thought or an urge, those are things that are just underneath that baseline. And if you can have your attention on those and kind of detach from them and just be, oh yeah, thinking, or itching, vibration, perception, or at least anyway, feeling those subtle sensations and the sound vibrations coming through. Then when the urge to react comes, the mind will be there. And you can see that urge to want to turn your head, the urge to open your eyes, the urge to think about something, the urge to move any part of the body. And that's the intention. And that's where you can change the karma, because you have a split second. And also when the attention is And at that deeper level of awareness and grounded, in the body, it's like it creates a kind of a buffer zone around the mind, or there's a buffer zone between the observing and the objects that are being observed. And that's what concentration does. So when you develop concentration and awareness, it creates this kind of buffer zone. That means it's a little space in which you can actually just see, oh, yeah, it's just an itch. It's just a sensation. It's just a perception. No need to follow that. And you can remain in your center without allowing your energy to go out to react to something that's not necessary. And probably 98 or 99% of the sensations and sounds and things that come to our senses are not necessary to really react to or waste our time chasing or thinking about. But we do it out of habit, but that's why people get exhausted. And for example, how many times a day, it'd be interesting, homework, count up how many times a day that you kind of, even just went like that, kind of touch some part of the body, probably 1,000, maybe, or blink your eyes even. Now, this may sound kind of funny or inconsequential, but no, it's quite important. The amount of energy that we waste thinking about things that are unnecessary and reacting to things that are unnecessary too. So that's how the practice of mindfulness, developing mindfulness and concentration. Now, it's not only mindfulness, you have to be concentrated for mindfulness to be effective. And that's why they have to be sort of balanced. And so that buffer zone is created, and that's really where you have a chance to apply the right effort. And part of mindfulness is something associated with mindfulness and awareness. It's called yoniso manasikara, which means wise attention. This is a key element also in the Buddhist psychology for helping to transform the mind and its habits and so on, to reduce the causes of the suffering. And that wise attention is this mindfulness that's aware of the things coming through the senses and has that discriminatory power to understand this object is not worth reacting to, or this object needs some attention, these other objects don't need any attention, and to kind of let them go. That buffer zone creates that split second, that cutting edge time when you can reflect on what is happening to you. Like you start to get angry, then you reflect, is there really need to get angry right now? I mean, is it really that bad? And to be able to reflect on the consequences of whether you're going to, retort to somebody, or you're going to, in some other way, even move your body, even in meditation. Okay, your leg's painful. So what? It's not going to kill you. You can learn to endure it, or endure those itches and so on. And so that's really the proving ground in meditation practice. We want those pains and itches and irritations to come up, because that's the only way you're going to transform. not by pushing the irritations away, but by fully experiencing them and understanding that, you don't own me. And by observing it for a couple of seconds, it will vanish because it's impermanent. Only when we give things attention, they keep recreating themselves hundreds and thousands of times, these grafting, because of the holding. But if we don't, they vanish very quickly and something else comes up. And so that's one of the most important aspects to understand in how these things kind of fit together. And also each moment of this, the mind arising and vanishing, moments of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking, that's called the momentary birth and death, actually. Now we're talking about living and dying with awareness, but we're talking about there's two forms of death, external death and internal death. So external death when the material body dies, but the mental death is each of these moments that arise and vanish. So a moment of hearing arise and vanish, a moment of seeing, a moment of feeling arise and vanish. Each of those is what would be termed a momentary birth and death of the consciousness. So again, the ego consciousness is coming up each of those times to form that graph of me, I'm doing all these things. But that's only the peak of the graphs. But when you come down under the baseline, or you come down into that subtler awareness, and you're no longer clinging to the objects, then the sense of I starts to fade away. Because the sense of I exists in direct proportion to the amount of attention or identification you're giving to any of these aggregates. And you're saying, oh, this is my body, this is my leg, this is the pain in my leg, then you're giving that attention. And you're creating this sense of this belongs to me. And then it's going to disturb you. I like this, I like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. So you're clinging to that feeling or that perception. And I have the right to be angry, I have the right to be angry, I can scratch my head if I want to. You're clinging to the reactions, to the sankharas. So they'll always be, re-strengthening themselves. But when you're observing, you've created this buffer zone, space of awareness, which can see these things come. And by just giving it a couple seconds, it'll vanish 9 times out of 10. And, you don't have to waste the energy. But anyway, so when you're not reacting to all these things coming through the senses, then the sense of that the dualistic consciousness doesn't come up very far above the baseline. And it eventually can dissolve or not be very prominent. It can dissolve totally eventually. But that's when we can understand how even the sense of the I is an illusion. Because again, with the baby, it wasn't there with the baby. It was created after about 6 months of the baby's life. They start creating ego consciousness. So, we might have heard these things in different reports, but people never stop to think, oh, how can that apply to me? How can that apply to my life situation? Really? No. Why don't people think like that? Because no one's taught them. So anyway, this is the part of one of the deepest parts of living with awareness. That kind of awareness, the moment-to-moment awareness and mindfulness, and especially the ability to overcome the causes of suffering. Now, this also dovetails with the Four Noble Truths. So as we all know, the teachings of the Buddha, all these teachings come out of the framework of the Four Noble Truths, meaning that the suffering exists. What is the cause of suffering? There can be an end to suffering, and then the way to live, think, and meditate that will allow the mind to unravel its intricate web of karmic interconnections and unwholesome habits, and gradually be able to develop that level of awareness that's more grounded in the present moment and not being dragged into unwholesome or unskillful types of actions and stimulations that then bring their karmic consequences. So understanding and what is suffering? I mentioned that yesterday. So one of the clearest definitions of suffering is wanting to be elsewhere than right here and right now at any time and any place. Now, a person should be able to sit down and be able to rest their mind in the middle and be able to be perfectly happy, resting in the present moment. Because all problems are problems of the past and future. Think of any problem that you might have, and you'll see that it's connected in one way or another to the past or the future. But when the mind is resting in the present moment, not creating the past and future out of all these stimulations that are coming through, then the mind becomes, stays in its inherent equanimity and tranquil vibration. So that is, but it's because it's connected to the body. So it's because we've lost that connection to the body that the mind has, it's lost that natural happiness. So now it's creating unnatural, it becomes dependent on external things for its happiness. And that's the main cause of suffering. And also that the self thinks it needs these objects of the world to be happy. And so it feels sad or dejected or suffers when it's not getting the objects of its desire or being able to get away from the painful feelings, that constant struggle of the ego with the world of impermanence around it. That's really what the Buddha termed as dukkha. That our people are sort of trapped in that simply because they've lost that natural connection to the present moment awareness. And so the cause of suffering is, that disconnect between the body and the mind, separation of the body and the mind, not being integrated and operating, harmoniously. And the end of suffering is when one can gradually come back to that state of being more grounded in the present moment and using the, the Eightfold Path and so on as the sort of guidelines for living a skillful life, or the way leading to the end of suffering. So again, all of that is part of living with awareness. But it really is the practice of the meditation and the ability to cultivate mindfulness and awareness, not just during meditation practice as such, but to understand that this process is going on all the time, and that's why we practice the awareness in all the postures, sitting, standing, walking, laying down, doing yoga, doing anything. It's about turning on that webcam, that inner webcam. It's always there available, but you've got to charge the batteries, right? So our specific meditation times and so on, and doing yoga exercise where you have a better circulation and more aliveness and deep breathing, all that helps to charge the batteries of the webcam, so that almost any time you wanted to, you could have that kind of buffer zone awareness. And then that awareness of things coming and going, but now you're in control. If something needs attention, you can go out and take care of it. But you do it in a skillful way, that you're not creating negative types of reactions. That means living out of harmony with the natural laws that I talked about. And so, acting with, without greed, hatred, and delusion. So anyway, that's what, we want to, and that's, basically a lifelong task for most people, but it has to start, here and now, because most of the time we're caught up in those habits, so it needs lots of practice. So anyway, this idea of the, tuning into the flow of impermanence, that's really the key in the Vipassana meditation. Normally our mind gets stuck on an individual object because of its habit, but by maintaining that buffer zone and not dwelling on any particular objects, then you're able to see many things coming and going at one, even at one time. Now, how many of you this morning, if you got into a good state of awareness, how many of you thought you could notice like a lot of different things happening almost simultaneously? You'd feel a sensation on your body while hearing a sound, by noticing a thought going through your mind, or, in the space of just 5 seconds, maybe, hundreds. I mean, you could if you're super concentrated, but even with a little bit of awareness, you can notice some. So the key in not clinging is to be able to notice more and more. But things are just arising and vanishing. So as you're able to notice more and more things, the mind doesn't have any time to react to any particular ones, because there's always something else coming up in the attention. And so that's sort of the key. Usually people think in meditation, oh, all these other sounds are distractions, and they want to sit in some isolated cave, or they want to sit in a sensory deprivation tank, or turn off all the lights, or, get all the sounds, but that's artificial. And you can't transform that way. You can only transform in the midst of, you transform it through wisdom and understanding. This sound doesn't have to disturb me. This itch doesn't have to disturb me. This thought doesn't have to disturb me. If you notice anger, okay, anger, it's a bubble of anger, and you don't cling on to it. I have a right to be angry. That person did this to me. Then the anger gets worse, right? So that's the key of how to reflect on the various types of emotions that come in. And that's why the Buddha said that, to regard all of these five aggregates, the material vibrations, feelings, perceptions, the reactions or habits, and the ego consciousness this is not me, not mine, not myself. That means they don't have any really owner or controller. They've just been created out of the force of habit over many, many lifetimes. And ultimately, there's no owner or controller. Now, we think there's an owner or controller, and in one way, okay, we say we are, but that's on the relative level of truth. But in the sort of the absolute level of truth, there isn't any sort of absolute owner or controller. Okay, so we want to, go ahead and try to continue to develop that ability to tune in to that flow of impermanence, and especially being watching the urges, the moment some itch or unpleasant sensation, to be aware of urging, and relax around the urge, and just watch the sensation that's producing the urge. And as you watch it, it peters out, because unless you react to the urge, that's the way it stays stronger, is by reacting to it. But when you don't react to it, or react to the object, the urge vanishes. I'll just mention this one last important point. That so in the mindfulness practice, that's why we use these sort of what's called bare attention. And when you feel something, it's just like if you notice you're getting angry, you just be aware, this is anger. But you don't think about the object of the anger. Just look at the anger. Feel, what is this anger doing? Oh, my jaw is tight, my fist is getting tight. Or you can notice some physical sensations connected with the anger. And you just watch those. And you're not reinforcing what caused the anger. But we're always reinforcing what caused the anger, or the desire or lust or whatever, any other types of whatever emotion or desire. So instead of focusing on the object that caused the pain or pleasure, we just focus on, especially the pain in the beginning, focus on that, or the sound. It's just hearing vibration. Don't focus on, what caused the vibration. It's just hearing. And so when you're not creating the object, then it vanishes very quickly. And that is really one of the key aspects of the Buddhist psychology, of the mental psychology in understanding the mind. And so the Buddha devised this very powerful and potent, sort of what I call high technology. Vipassana meditation is what I like to call high tech, mental technology, mental physics, to be able to see how the mind is creating these illusions and these habits and then especially employing the countermeasures to impede or short circuit, especially our negative types of reactions that bring the painful results. So anyway, it's a long process. All this is part of that investigation. That's why in awareness practice and mindfulness practice, it's not just about sitting there and getting enveloped in some blissful state. No. That can happen later on, but it's definitely shouldn't be the goal. It'll happen by itself once the causes of suffering are removed. So anyway, sorry if I talked too long. So if you have any questions about any of that, again, you can write them down for tonight, and for those who are tuning in over Zoom. And also, if you have any questions that come up now, write them down, and then tonight when you sign in, or you can write them on a chat, because we still have some questions from last night. So, okay, so let's. Okay, just for a moment, we're going to stand up in a minute, but just hold on. So, just for a moment, just close the eyes and try to cut off that external looking. See how quickly you can just bring your attention to feel your buttocks and feet, or come back to feel the outline of the body, sitting. Take a deep, slow breath. Just reground the attention in the body. Creating that buffer zone of awareness. Okay, now go ahead and mindfully stand up, and we'll do some standing awareness for a while before sitting down again.
Bhante, we cannot hear you.
About now.
Fine, now we can hear.
Thank you.
Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, feeling the whole body. Breathing out, feeling the whole body. Gradually bringing the mind into the body, grounded and centered in the laboratory. Finding the outside, breathing body, like coming to the door of the laboratory. And as you do some deep breathing, feeling the more internal sensations, you're opening the door, going inside the laboratory. Looking down through the microscope. Feel those 4 phases of each breath cycle. Expanding in breath, the brief pause. Contracting out breath, the brief pause. Just tuning into that arising and vanishing, beginning and end of each breath. The in-breath starts and stops. The out-breath starts and stops. The pauses start and stop also. All those little sensations of the clothing rub against the skin of the stomach, rib cage, your chest. All of those have just arise and vanish very quickly, one by one. Just keep turning up the power of the microscope. Even around the breathing, you can notice other sensations arising and vanishing. or movement of the body. Even a sound arising and vanishing. Prickling sensations arising and vanishing. Be alert for the urges arising, urge to move, or any wantings, mental vibration. Be alert for any aversion, unpleasant feeling. There's always something new to notice that arises and vanishes. No need to get stuck on any particular one. Especially be alert how quickly certain sensations vanish. Before you even recognize what it was, it vanished. Try to get that sense of the nervous system being like a giant web. Being vibrated by sound, body vibrations, visible objects, smells or tastes. The consciousness is like the spider, just listening to the vibration. Just keep turning up the power of the mental microscope. Concentrated awareness. To notice even subtler vibrations. Thoughts quick enough, it'll vanish before you even figure out what kind of a thought it was. And see if you can identify those five aggregates. That's a material vibration. This is a feeling, that's a perception, that's a volition, urge, a wanting. That's a thought of I, me, or mine. Right. You can continue standing longer, have good concentrated awareness. Otherwise, when you're ready, you can mindfully sit back down and continue the same awareness in the sitting posture. Just try to recognize what is different between the standing position and the sitting position. Each different posture will produce different perceptions, different sensations, different feelings. Just think in terms of material vibrations, feelings, perceptions, urges, thoughts. If the mind loses its edge, its sharpness, back and take some deep, slow breaths. Refresh the awareness. Charge up the webcam battery. Keeping the mind focused. Noticing the interaction between material vibrations, feelings, perceptions, reactions. They're all intimately connected. And see what a lure or a power they have over the mind, over the eye. What kind of problems they can create if you cling to them. And understand the role of mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. In the process of meditation. So Neil, the first person with the interview, you can gradually get ready for that. Meet me down in the kitchen. The second person would be Josh, 4:15. There's another person that can come at 4:30. Always continue your practice. You can sit as long as you can, and when ready, you can stand up and walk. Keep that webcam on. And for those who are still tuned in on the Zoom program, we're going to bring this meditation to a close now, because here in the in-house program, we're going to be starting our afternoon yoga session. So we're going to close down the Zoom portion now, and then resume again at 7 o'clock with the puja and the questions and answers. So, if you like, I've sent out those videos, and if you have those links to those yoga videos there at home, you can try to do some of those if you like. But here it's difficult to broadcast doing the yoga and trying to get that on camera in the Zoom. So, okay. So we'll see you back at about 7 o'clock.
Sarvam Saranai.